The first car I ever had.
5:25. Ooh, that's.
I'd like to call the meeting to order.
I love you with that gal.
Sarah, can you do the roll call, please?
Cherish,
Here.
Hoffman is not here, Kimball,
Here.
Roach,
Here.
Stanton.
Here.
You got a farm.
Okay, I think we need a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I will motion.
And I will second it.
All right, is that just a all in favor?
Aye.
Sarah, is that an all in favor?
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? None. All right, the agenda has been approved. How about the meeting minutes from January 21st?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from the special meeting on January 21st, 2025.
Okay, do I have a second?
I will go ahead and second that.
Is there any discussion about the meeting minutes? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes? Say
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. All right, now we're on to public comments, agenda items only, limit of 3 minutes. I don't think we have anyone in the room. Do we have anyone online?
At the top of someone's hair.
Hi, Chris.
Okay, I take it Chris is on mute, so she doesn't want to make a comment.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so we're on to item 6, review and discussion. So the first thing is council priorities from strategic planning. And Scott, were you going to lead us through that?
Yeah. So, yes, as you're aware, council hosted its annual strategic planning session. It was a long day. I think that it was a productive day though, and I think it was really realistic of what we think that we can do within a year. So, as always, Saugatuck City is very project heavy at the moment, but there's a lot of opportunities for overlap with what, some of the things that this group can work on to contribute to the mission that council has set. So in your packet, there's kind of a summary of the planning session. So for fiscal year 2025, 2026, and all the priorities are broken down into 3 different categories. So you have operations, public health and safety, then you have infrastructure, and then parks and recreation. So hopefully you have all had a chance to review that. And I know that this group also has an ambitious list of things that we'd like to work on as well. So, but quite a few of them overlap and a lot of them are big picture. And so, like Village Square Courts, for example, that's a big project for the city financially, from a staff resource level and whatnot. So,
Scott, could we talk about if there is a role for PPW on that project, or is that one just off and running?
no, I don't think it's just up and running. I think that so we're gonna dive into that as under the DNR trust fund grant application on the packet. So
Okay.
maybe we could take a little deeper dive into it at that point. But,
Okay,
but yeah, there's definitely an opportunity for Parks and Public Works to weigh in on that as far as the design goes. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of put it out there for discussion. There's really no formality to it. This is the list of priorities. So if we want to talk about anything, or if I can provide any clarification on anything, by all means, fire away.
Does anybody have an extra copy of the strategic plan?
And mine's cut off, so
You can, yeah.
I just want to
there's-
print a couple of things.
I'd almost like to see
Yeah,
one that's
Lauren,
not
can you-
cut off.
Do you want to add any flavor to this since you were at the meeting?
No, I just feel like, obviously it's a good sized list, but there are things that we can definitely help work on.
I put a little chart, like kind of an asterisk next to each one that I thought that was somewhat related to Parks and Public Works, at least at some point in the project.
Yeah.
But
Obviously, the treatment of invasive species, that's something that this group has already been working on. Again, I think at an education level, I think we can work on getting some things out to the public as far as our invasive species, particular group that we have in this. So if there's some things we can work on, especially when it comes to the Saugatuck Harbor Natural Area too. Obviously, we just passed that to get that back in working
It's
order.
official.
It's official.
Okay, great.
So that is back in order and we have access to those funds. It's like 200 and some $1,000 that we have access to. And again, signage and invasive species were kind of something that we know we can work on.
Yeah, and the
Going forward.
trails.
Yep, yep. And
Optimizing
yeah,
the
and
trails.
helping with some of the trails. So, and that doesn't mean that it's a DPW thing. It could be something that we, get some help with. Whether that's ODC or some other organizations that could help us with that. I think that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. There's some things like, Public Works is just always going to be somewhat involved in this stuff. Like, for example, with the Saugatuck Harbor Natural Area, we've got like barbed wiring underneath some of the sand dunes that was put there at some point for some reason. And over time, as the living dune system shifts around, some of it gets exposed and then some portions of it get buried. And so, trying to mitigate safety risks and stuff like that are definitely something that obviously Public Works will take the lead on. But as far as like, adopting or kind of formalizing the trail system out there and developing signage for it, uniform signage, hopefully, there's a lot of opportunity here that, Parks and Public Works could help with some of that.
Right. The restoring of the Mount Bald Head vegetation, I do feel like we have to get the deer population under control before we tackle that. I don't know if you feel the same, Scott, but any vegetation we put there or attempt to put there, I feel like might be a lost cause.
Yeah, not entirely, but a lot, yes. I mean, they definitely take a toll. So there's been like 2 or 3 different efforts to reestablish some vegetation on that dune. I have, for the life of me, at one point I was given a document that was, I think it was put together by, it was either MSU or the DNR, but it was kind of an inventory of all the tree species that had been killed on that dune. And so what we were able to do at the time was take that list of tree species and get replacements for them, direct replacements, and get them in the ground. And that's kind of where we took this approach of like the bare root tree systems, because logistics obviously plays a huge role in reestablishing that dune, right?
Right.
How do we physically get these things up there? And so we're like, all right, well, maybe one of our best approaches is well, let's accept a certain percentage rate of failure, with bare root trees, but some of them are going to live, and quite a few of them have. So
So
it's,
that was done.
we've done that, I think,
Mhm.
3 times now, but 2 different groups, 3 different attempts.
Recently? I'm just curious.
Over the past 7 years,
Okay.
I would say.
Oh. And is there a list of um, a species of plants that are good for the dune to help, keep the dune from eroding, but also that the deer won't eat?
Right, yeah, you want, there's like deer repellent products that you can put out there, or, you could plant trees and put some fencing or something
Okay.
around it if you wanted to. A lot more labor intensive.
Yeah,
And you're kind of disturbing the soil with adding those extras around that tree. And so, at what rate do we want to do that? I'm not exactly sure, but a lot of the trees that we've planted are doing just fine up on that dune. And I do
Okay.
still have the list of tree varieties. So,
good.
but we might be able to do some, kind of starting to look into more of like dune grass type of
Right.
species versus just trees. But you want some sort of a blend between fast growing trees so they can establish those root systems, and then slow growing trees, which are going to be there long term. So like fast growing like poplars, and then slow growing like oaks, for example.
Okay.
So just it's kind of like the same approach that we take with our urban forests, with like diversification is one of the best things that we can do against like
Mhm.
invasive species like what we had with emerald ash borer.
Mhm.
It came in and wiped out every single ash tree in the city that had to get removed. And so if we can diversify the amount of, species that we have, then the better protected we are.
What's going on with the deer mitigation committee?
I think they're still just coming up with a recommendation of,
Do they meet this week?
It's either this week or next.
Is there, are they making any progress?
Just said they haven't been.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is I have a couple clients through my business that I go into Douglas all the time, and there are so many deer. I mean,
They're
there's like,
completely displaced right now. I have them in my backyard for the first
I
time.
have
I've had
them-
them in
Us
16
too.
years of owning a home.
I have 5 in my backyard every night.
Yeah.
But it's not about me. It's like these herds in Douglas are 10, 15 deer at a pop.
Yeah.
Pictures on Facebook where there's like 20 deer
Yeah.
or something.
And in relation to what you're saying, Scott, you could plant trees, but they're eating everything to ground level. They're removing the new growth.
Right, right.
All right. Yeah.
And then as far as the other priorities, just the idea of evaluating a community foundation option to accept citizen donations. And I think that is something that, in the next few months, if that's something that we can tackle once we get through some of our more immediate concerns, I think that would be really great to establish some sort of a Friends of the Library, Friends of the Park type of.
Do you want me to talk about that now, or do you want me to talk about it somewhere else?
I think we can talk about it now. It's part of our, yeah.
All right, so I'm not saying who, but I've contacted a lawyer with a couple other people. And we're going to establish a Friends of the Park, Saugatuck Parks Foundation.
That would be great.
Well,
Yeah.
is that something, I mean, that just
It's a
independent people
private
can
gig
do?
so that the city, the council can, if somebody wants to donate, let's say, a bike, fix-it station.
Yeah.
And they can, there's a vehicle to donate the money to, and the council can say, okay, we have a perfect spot for it.
Mhm.
Or we can say we have a perfect spot for it. But it'll be a 501, 3C
C3.
organization, C3 or
C3.
C3. Yeah, I always get those two mixed up, not a 4, but a 3. And so it'll be a vehicle for people to donate money to.
That's great.
And
And to raise money, right?
and to raise money.
Yeah.
And possibly, if someone says, hey, I got a vacant piece of land somewhere, I want to donate it for a park, that type of situation. And you bring it forward to the council and they can say, hey, that's a great idea. We'll accept it.
Nice,
Things like that.
nice. I think it's needed, with Friends of the Blue Star Trail, with Friends of the Library, we've found that there's really great fundraising opportunities. And plus, it's a social thing. We know we like to enjoy those social things, and it gets more people involved because it's fun and it's a way to raise money. And then when there's big projects out there, we can turn to the Friends of the Parks and say, hey, we really want this, this project. Do you have any funds that, you could help with? Yeah, I think it'd be great.
So this group would be more geared towards like like a funding source, than,
For things basically that the city taxpayer dollars cannot. That's the process we set at when I was involved in the Friends of the Library. Money donated for things that the city taxpayer dollars can't pay for, which theoretically the city taxpayer dollars could probably pay for 99% of stuff. But if somebody wants to donate something, in memory of something, they can, more than a park bench.
Right.
Like the resurfacing of the tennis courts, the basketball court, like a splash pad.
Mhm.
I think once you put that vehicle into place, that type of organization into place, people will come out of the woodwork.
So too.
I think so too. I think it's really needed. So that's fabulous.
Yeah.
So that process has started.
Good.
Um,
How do we foresee that working though? Because, we've obviously had this happen multiple times now where people are coming forward, they're seeing the investment, especially that this group has done with downtown parks. And so they want to come forward with money. They potentially have specific ideas about what they want to do with that money. And then it does put more work on City Hall
Mhm.
and staff. And it also is maybe a specific thing that isn't necessarily on this list.
Right.
So, I think that's something that we have to consider too, because people come forward and say, this is something from my heart of what I want, even benches and things like that. I think when we establish this, we need to be
And
specific and thoughtful about like how and what you can say yes to and accept, or what needs to go to council, because you don't want to take someone's money to say, yes, we can make these things happen, when that Friends of might not
And-
actually have the control of that, because in the end, if it is city property, it has to be voted on.
yeah,
through
and
DPW, through
in the process of
council.
of writing the bylaws for the Friends of the Park, we'll establish
Mhm.
what our responsibilities are and what our duties are, and it won't be a blanket. It won't be vague. It'll be say, hey, if you wanted, there's going to be more people involved than me.
Yeah.
I would just bring up several years ago, does everyone remember when Jim Selman wanted to donate the money to replace the gazebo with a band shell? And that, I think when you think about a project and what can go wrong, that's a really good example.
Mhm.
Good
And
example.
so, we just want to make sure that, I don't know if we can let people just come in and say, I want to give money and it has to go for this. You know, I mean, this all has to be sort of.
Well, I mean, if somebody, let's say somebody wanted to come in and say, somebody like similar, hey, I want to replace the gazebo with the band shell, and we're like, hey, that's beyond our scope of things, to talk to the council.
Right. It just all needs to be in the bylaws
Yeah.
that you referenced.
And I got a feeling that it won't be a immediate process writing this.
Yeah.
It'll take some time.
Well, I think with having the priorities from council as part of your, reference, and then also having kind of that wish list that Nancy put together and we all looked at and said, yeah, there's a lot of things that could be like really great wish list things, whether they're small projects or, major projects like an ice rink or something much bigger. You can have those wish list items, and that could be something that they can, work off from.
Yes.
And land acquisition, all of those types of things, donations and, yeah.
Now, did council come up with a wish list? Because I'm looking at this and
This is our priorities for,
Yeah, priorities, but then wish list, because there's a lot
we
of
did
things
not
that
come
are
up with a wish list.
done. I mean, the stuff with Bald Head, that's,
Yeah, these are just our priorities for the year.
yeah.
We just had a conversation about our capital improvements plan as well too, and that plays heavily into these priorities. And so, just to remind everybody, what we have going on already, it's Maple Street, it's a multi-million-dollar project. And so at some point, there's probably going to be some input, needed on Parks and Public Works Committee's input as far as, some sort of recreational path next to it, potentially. We have Mount Bald Head restrooms, the Village Square courts. This group will play an active role in the design, especially of that. Mount Bald Head upper platform, pavement markings out there. We learned from Douglas's culvert failure that we should probably get our culverts inspected and on the radar, just to do what we can to prevent a similar situation to what they've had to deal with. And they've dealt with it really well, by the way. Mill and overlay work, so those road resurfacings. I think for this year, one of the priorities is, as we're working through Maple Street, we're also turning our attention back over to Park Street and Elizabeth Street. So two major roads, especially Park Street, where there's this massive appetite and conversation to be had about what should the design look like. It all revolves around what that design will look like. And, private property, there's just a lot of work that I think that this group can probably help our engineering firm and Public Works and ultimately City Council take a bite out of what's going to be most acceptable. Not everyone's going to like the final product, but if we can do our due diligence, especially with this group of people, and just do everything that we can to make it as good of a project as it can be, that would be very helpful for everybody. So, we have seawall and concrete repairs at miscellaneous spots around the city that we're looking to repair. We did have a little bit of we kind of have some gravel roads out there still that are in need of maintenance. And then we have the City Hall interior project redoing the inside of this building now that the outside is done. The Village Square restroom siding, we're hoping to get that done and re-sided. But then also too, something that came up, engineering, John Moxie and I, we went around and looked at some of these seawall locations that are in need of some repair, and one of them was the chain ferry. And as we looked at the chain ferry, we actually decided, looking at this thing, it's kind of cobbled together with like old cattle gate fencing and like, hose clamps are holding things together. And like, this thing is not like a great engineered, piece of infrastructure. And so what that revealed to us is that we have a lot of opportunity to improve this, and that being such an iconic site for the city. I feel strongly that that's something I would love this group to get involved in with us, as far as, we can, engineering and Public Works, we can work on what's it going to take to keep it safe and functional. But it'd be nice if, with a piece of history like that, it'd be really nice if this group could help us out with some of the more design elements of that project. So there's some things underway that I think it's going to be really satisfying work for this group, and I don't think there's any shortage of it out there.
Well, when we talk, we've talked about a lot of different projects, and, what I've been, wrestling with is which ones are active, which ones are basically waiting in the wings. And I don't know if we've quite sorted that out, or I don't feel like we have.
So what my goal for this was today, you
That
know,
was my
we
list.
can only move at a certain rate, right? And I think that just simply getting a good bearing on what the council priorities are and reviewing that at this session is good enough, where hopefully between now and the next meeting that we have, maybe people can spend some time, committee members can spend some time diving into it and coming up with more actionable plans for moving forward and what this group could help accomplish.
Okay, so is there anything else we want to say about council priorities? Okay, naming of the airport property. I think Kelly, you took the lead on that one.
Well, I'll let you speak to it as far as what council did and then I
Okay.
can jump in.
Yeah, I think it was just crystal clear. Outdoor Discovery Network is going to start to put together the parking lot plan out there, the trailhead, the signage, and then, you know, the overlook. And before they get into creating signage, it's an opportunity that we have to, what are we calling this thing? You know, it's been the old airport property for as long as I can remember. I never liked that name, so I called it the 63rd Street property that the city owns in the township. That's what I called it. So,
That's catchy.
well, because no one knew like airport property, what are you talking about? And I'm like,
We have an
here's the
airport.
full description for it.
Right.
So,
Right.
but it's also had a lot of uses out there too. I mean, you know, there's evidence based on some of the tree species that are growing out there that was, we think that there was tree farming going on at some point out there. There was an old snowmobile club that occupied what I call the old senior center. I remember a cousin of mine had her high school open house at the senior center. It was like open at the time and people could rent it out. And it was pretty decent at the time. But that's a long time ago and here we are today. So I think that council really just kept it broad and said they'd like to hear some recommendations on what Parks and Public Works Committee could come up with as far as naming it. The only thing that council expressed a strong interest in is that have some sort of community engagement piece. So whether that's the school, hopefully, or anybody and everybody in the community should be able to weigh in and help generate ideas for this. That's it.
Is the building restorable?
Yeah, I think so. There's like a crawl space underneath it, so you probably want to just take a deeper look into like the flooring structure of it, but it's not
Because-
like a concrete
Because
slab.
there would be a community involvement space, you know, rentable space. You know, indoor bathrooms, if the cross-country team were to use it, a meeting space.
Well, but that is not part of the initial dollars that are going towards the park right now.
Understandable.
Yeah,
Right.
but futuristically.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, it could be for something, hey, I want to donate some money to fix the building up.
We even talked about that on the city staff side of things, like here we have an asset, you know, should we put this thing back on our capital improvement, you know, get it on our plan, you know, get a contractor out there, just do an inspection, say, is this thing worth it? At one point, I think the fire department was gonna burn it down for a training exercise.
Right.
You know, so it's been all over the
What could
map.
go wrong?
But I think starting off just saying like, here's a potential asset that we have, get somebody that's qualified to go in and, you know, do an inspection of it and see if it's worth actually sticking, you know, 50, 60 grand into it or whatever it takes to get it usable again.
Yeah.
Or just knock it down and start over. So
Mhm. Can we recommend that?
well, I've talked about it with previous city managers before. I don't think that I would need anything just to be able to.
So Kelly and I had a chance to meet with the Convention Visitors Bureau and their marketing team out there just to look at ideas for shoulder season events that they might be able to have out there and everything. And one of the ideas is maybe eventually making it so there are bathrooms out there. And then that way, if there's ever any kind of an event, you know, we could have local groups help, you know, with those events and then have those bathrooms. And then they're kind of in charge of whether, you know, they're cooking something out there and have food for this event. And then they're in charge of the cleanup afterwards. I think there could be some good opportunities for that in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, or if we wanted some type, like I was at Pigeon Creek this past weekend.
Yeah.
With cross-country skiing. I mean, that little lodge that they have there is probably about the same size.
Yeah.
It's super simplistic and you rent snowshoes or cross-country skis for $8. They have a fire pit outside and then they have a little.
Well, hot
flooding zone,
chocolate
little
and
hot
yeah.
chocolate, and it's
Yeah.
an amazing community experience. And we just happened to have good snow this winter, so it
Yeah.
actually worked out. I mean, parking lot was packed, kids everywhere. I mean, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
So if that, is in good enough shape that potentially that could be that down the road, I mean, that would be pretty amazing, be a huge asset. And shoulder season, I mean, that's what they're looking to do, is how do we bring more people in for the assets that we have in terms of the economics of our town, so.
I think it's a future idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, right,
For sure.
definitely.
But toward the naming of,
Yes.
the park, so a couple things that I did based on our last conversation was reach out to Mark Neinlinger, who's the new superintendent of Saugatuck Public Schools. And, he is more than happy to work with us on this. He was very excited. And, so I said, hey, do you remember how they did the naming, the new naming for the mascot, right? And obviously that is a much larger project than what we're probably looking to do here. But I thought that would be kind of an interesting case study to give us some framework on how did they engage the community, and could we just take a couple pieces of this?
Mhm.
So I got this off to Sarah just yesterday, so thank you for adding it. So you can kind of look on their timeline. They started in October 2020 and they voted, let's see, in January. So just a few months process. And I think that's all we're looking to do, is maybe take this on in the next month or so and figure this out. So I think what we could do is come up with a mission statement, because anybody that we're sending this out to, they're gonna wonder, okay, what are you actually looking for? So I think we could come up with ideas, okay, with the park, what exactly are we looking to do? And just kind of put that in writing, and then send this off. So they obviously have the board that they're working with. So then this, in early November, they did, gather input from advisory group to narrow selection for community. And then, they put it out to the whole community to begin with.
Yep.
And then they narrowed it down to the schools. Kids were involved as well. And then they took just a few names and then put it to their board again. So I think we could take pieces of this where maybe we put something, we create a mission statement of like, hey, this is what we're looking to do. This is what we're looking for feedback on. Put a survey out through what the city already has in terms of, the email list, who's subscribed to that, get information, then meet again, narrow that down.
Mhm.
Also send it, we could also send it to the schools
Mhm.
and then come up with, 4 ideas and move along.
I think that's a great way to do it.
So,
Sounds like we have someone willing to take the lead on it, maybe? You?
oh yeah.
Yeah,
happy to do that. Yeah, and,
great.
they're, so, yeah. And Lauren is happy to do this again with the school. So Lauren Omdale, who led this charge with the mascot changing, now works at the school. So it's super easy as far as that she has access to this, and they're happy to work with us. And
So what would that look like? Like when they came back to the school board, like the school board obviously had the final decision on what the mascot name would be, but like at the end of it, would we have, like, here's 3 different name options that we'd like to, like PPW would recommend, and here's our first, second, and third choice?
So
Is
that was
kinda-
part of the feedback I heard from council, is they would love to like have choices and not a yes or no.
Mhm.
yes.
Because then they feel bad saying no to something that everyone works so hard at coming up with a name, and then they're like, no, and then they look like the bad guys. But they would love to have your top 3, what are your top 3 with your number 1 recommendation? But here's your top 3, and, and then go from there.
Yeah. So I think if we get a mission statement, send it out, start broad, get all the ideas, because you just never know what you're gonna come up with. And then we can narrow that.
I love, actually, because I've sat around and said, what do I think? And I am so bad at this.
You
I
get
couldn't
the
come up
creative
with-
types out
I could
there.
not come up with anything that I thought was worthy of it. And so I would love to open it up to the whole community, because surely there are people out there that have some good ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
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 Well, I can take a stab at putting some ideas for the mission statement. I'll
That'd be
send it to
great.
this group. You guys give your feedback back. I
That'd
don't
be
think we
great.
need to do a special meeting or anything for this. I think we can
Yeah.
just work
Email.
independently and then go from there. And then I can talk with Scott about getting this out with Ryan
Mhm.
out to the community. And I think sooner rather than later.
I agree.
'Cause I know ODC is diligently looking forward to doing this. So we want to make sure that we're not rushed in
Good.
getting this.
And it's a good time to do it too, when, people are in town and not distracted with all the fun things there are to do in summer and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
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 Great. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Kelly.
Kelly. All right, Scott, do you want to talk to us about the DNR trust fund application?
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, so it sounds like as of last night, council approved, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, you were there.
Wasn't.
Oh, you were not
wasn't
there?
there.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, we both believe then that Okay, Sarah was there. Council approved, where we left off with Village Square Courts is that Ryan, the city manager, was having a conversation with the donator on what their appetite would be, for us to pursue a DNR trust fund grant. And so, at first, the donator was against it, just from tying up dollars. They're like, this is too slow. I don't want to do this. I just want results, right? Fair enough. Well, it sounds like maybe that attitude has shifted a little bit and that they would be open to pursuing a DNR trust fund grant. So last night, council approved, for our engineering firm, Fleece and Vanderbrink, to fill out the application for the funding. So, part of the scoring criteria for the grant is universal access design. And so, we thought that it would be helpful if this group has any sort of idea of a way for us to come up with some letters of support from some sort of a, disabilities network of some kind. So,
Are we able to get that from the playground or anything? Is that something that we had in the past or a contact in the past?
I thought reaching out,
See.
I can reach out to Sinclair Recreation. Are you talking about for the
Yeah,
Village Square Playground?
that
Yeah.
and out at Oval Beach when we got that donation as well. I don't know.
For the swing set?
Yeah,
Yeah, we also got that from Sinclair, so.
okay.
I can reach out to them.
The swim, can't think what it's
Life
called.
jackets?
No, the.
Wheelchair.
Swim wheelchair. Thank
Yes.
you, Kelly.
I'm with you.
And that was donated by the Disability Network of Southwest Michigan, so.
Okay.
Oh, so
they
there's
could
a,
Possibly.
Do you have a contact for them?
Okay, great.
If anyone
Well, and I
has any
think-
other ideas.
Is it helpful if we have a compilation of all the things that, investments that we're making as a municipality towards being more ADA compliant too? So it's like, if we're listing off all of these things that we're doing, is that helpful, Scott, with the grant process? To say, hey, we're really
Or at least in
doing,
the letter.
really doing our best to be inclusive when we have the chance
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
read off
depending on what the
something.
turnaround time would be for that, because this is a tight turnaround. I think that, they're trying to get the application in by April 1st.
Okay,
So this is like blazing speed from a municipal standpoint. So whatever kind of support we can drum up within that time frame, the more the better. I think so. We have like up to 15 out of 250 grant points available for just universal access design. So
200,
15 out of 250, yeah, that could be awarded for just universal access.
okay, awesome.
So does it help if you have an individual write a letter, or does it help more if you have an organization?
All it says is prior to April 1st of the application year, the applicant obtained a project review from a person with a disability in their community, an organization representing people with disabilities, or an advocate for persons with disabilities. So yes,
Okay.
and is it the more the better? Or do we not want to overflood it?
yeah, I mean, I don't think we need 100, but if we had, 5 or 10, I think that would be,
That'd be okay.
yeah, really helpful.
And is this a matching grant?
I don't know right offhand.
Okay.
So the last number breakdown that we had a potential, $100,000 donation.
Mhm.
It's about $10,000 for this application for the DNR trust fund grant. And
What do you mean by that?
that's how much it costs to put the application in. So it's like 10 grand.
You have to
These
have an application
applications,
fee.
they're expensive to apply for grants in a lot of
I
cases.
know. It's-
So, but the award, if I remember right, don't quote me, the award was about 150,000.
Okay.
I believe. So potentially 100K from the donator, 150K for, for the
So they,
donation and
so
then,
they would still bring their money to the table. This
Yeah.
is not in place
Right.
of.
right.
This is, oh,
I think when the Blue Star Friends got the DNR grants, I don't think there was a match. We had to have a match for the MDOT TAP grant, but I don't recall ever hearing that we needed one for the DNR.
I can send you like the scoring criteria and kind of what the details are of the grant itself, but if you want to have that kind of fun, you can have that information.
Okay, so our plan for that is, Scott, you're going to check with Sinclair.
Mhm.
Sarah's got you're going to follow up with Southwest Michigan Disability. Is anybody else? And Keith, you mentioned it.
I know a couple of people that are disabled, so I could ask them if they'd be willing to help out, write a letter. I need some criteria though for what it's all about, though. If you can send that to me.
Sure.
In an email, that'd help.
And then basically with the goal of, the application has to be in by April 1st. So we would need these documents to support it by
Now.
mid-March.
Yeah.
by-
As soon as possible.
Yeah, as soon as possible.
But no later than, let's say, we really, I like end dates. I like target dates. Deadlines are good. So,
Next meeting.
which is
Will be
not
good.
till March 25th, which I know because I've got a vacation planned to leave on the 26th,
Mhm. Right?
which I planned, so I would be here for the meeting. So it's okay to be that late, even though the application has to be in by April 1st.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I think Fleece and Vanderbrink is going to be working on most of the elements of this application. And so it's just a matter of just
Then that'll just be
taking
add
the
on and,
documents, including it into the application and pushing it off.
okay, okay.
Right, well, that's exciting.
Yeah, and that's basically, we wouldn't find out on the grant until late in the year, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that
I'm
what
not
the
sure.
DNR I think those DNR grants, basically, you don't find out until it's either very late in the year. So this project basically is just going to be on hold until we,
I don't think so. I think that we still
No?
have a lot of work that we can do as far as like the design of it. You know, what are we designing? I think that at Fleece and Vanderbrink can take a, maybe first crack at that and then have a little bit of back and forth between engineering and then Parks and Public Works Committee weighing
okay,
in on what we'd like to see. And I know that we've seen a lot of good ideas, like, artistic touches to the courts that we could start to kind of build what the plan is, really, in my opinion.
okay.
And ultimately, that's one of the priorities that council set for the year is Village Square Court. So let's catch it and go.
Yeah. Okay. All right, moving on, tree work update.
Yeah, so prior to the Parks and Public Works Committee being formulated, we had a tree board, and basically the main function of the tree board was that it served as an appeals board. If somebody came forward with a tree removal application and that application got denied, then they could appeal that decision to the tree board. But other than that, it was somewhat of a formality just to absorb some of the responsibilities for us in terms of becoming Tree City USA through the Arbor Day Foundation. So I would always give kind of an update of the year's tree work, especially removals. Removals seem to be the portion of the tree work that really get the most attention. And that people they have the most questions about that, right? Because it's really upsetting seeing beautiful specimen trees get taken down. So they'd like to know why in a lot of cases. So that's really what I wanted to put this on the agenda for, was just to kind of meet that requirement. We did do some tree work. I'll kind of hone in more on the removals versus like the tree care. But 569 Hoffman Street, we took down a silver maple.
And were these like diseased or?
In most
Life
cases,
or-
it was just decay. So just really old trees, trees that we've repeatedly worked on over the years, whether we put support cables in them to kind of let them hop along for a couple extra decades. There's a tree up at 309 Grand Street right now that we haven't removed. I would encourage you to stop and take a look at it. It's a beautiful tree. You're going to see a lot of decay within the base of the tree, so it becomes a safety issue. But if you look up in the canopy of it, you're going to see about 3 steel support cables that the city has spent money on, years and years ago to help this thing maintain its safety structure until it can't no longer. So it's kind of cool. I'm always really happy to do that part of the work as well, like how we're not getting these trees back, within our lifetimes. And a lot of these things are 120 plus years old. And so taking them down it's pretty serious. It changes the whole profile of an area.
Right.
The one that we took down at 341 Main Street, you know, it just changes everything. It lets more sunlight in. You're never getting them back. Well, you are, but just not.
It's
not
gonna take
for our
another
benefit,
100
but-
years before. it
yeah.
has
I
the same
watched that tree
effect.
come down. It was.
I know.
It was sad.
But for
It's-
safety reasons, obviously, we saw the willow tree and how that could have been really, a much worse situation. So I'm so glad you do this work.
Well, it's really important, you know, Public Works, we're the ones that get called in at 3 in the morning when a tree fails, right? And people don't necessarily see that stuff. And luckily, they don't see that stuff. If we're lucky, it happens at night when there's not a lot of activity around. But Lauren, I think that you saw one down the street from your house a
Yes.
couple years ago where it was like
Yes.
massive.
Massive.
And there's serious consequences when these things fail. And so getting eyes on them, there's trees that we routinely look at every single year and have an arborist assess every year. Like, okay, is this the year that we should take this down? Or is that, so we truly do everything that we can to keep this going and not do that many removals. But in the grand scheme of things, there's 6 trees on this in your packet that I highlighted or drew attention to, one of which was the Cook Park willow tree. And whether it's we make the decision or Mother Nature makes the decision for us, one way or another, these things are safety issues. And so 6 trees out of all the trees that we have in the city is not aggressive by any means. So, but every one of these, I would stand behind and say that they needed to go. So,
Is there any, when you're replanting the trees, is there any thought on like avoiding power lines and stuff like that? So you're not
Oh, yeah.
dealing with that issue any further?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We always have to consider that. And that's what's a bugger about Saugatuck because we do have so many overhead utilities. So, I think like in front of Retro, for example, I planted a couple of Armstrong gold maples and they're kind of like a columnar shape. That would be a horrible choice for underneath power lines because once they start to get into conflict, you're essentially chopping half the tree off, or you're ending up with that like gnarly looking wishbone shape that you can see. So
There
there's,
are trees that don't grow 34, that will top out at 30 feet, 40 feet.
there are, yeah, dogwoods. Yeah, you can shorten the species. What we try to do, especially like Butler Street, for example, we have massive trees growing along Butler Street. And the reason we've been able to do it successfully is that if you can plant some type of variety that has a full canopy, but not like a dense canopy, if that makes sense, then when you do remove a couple of limbs from it, it doesn't just draw your attention to it immediately. You can kind of hide the utilities within that canopy. So like Japanese Zelkovas, for example, there's a lot of them going up and down Butler Street. So, but yeah, if you can avoid conflicts altogether by planting a shorter species, that's a good option too. It kind of depends. It's kind of site specific.
Is there, are you putting that out to the public so they, just some education so people know that you're doing this work? Any kind of
Yeah.
email thing that our clerk would send out or anything like that?
We had some conversation about that. One of the residents that I talked to really expressed an interest in doing something like that. Not that I think there is definitely a balance between making a decision and getting the work done and then over communicating because sometimes you just end up getting into like a Google war about like fact checking and it just
Yeah.
bogs down staff
Right.
time tremendously. And so we want to be transparent and open and honest with people, but
Yeah.
You talk
we
about
also want to make.
recommendations.
Oh, I was just our email blast and our social media. We usually, send things out there to let people know when this work is being done and why it's being done and.
Most importantly, what I find is that
Agreed.
I try to at least communicate really, really clearly with the residents that are most affected by it.
Yeah,
That way it doesn't become like this mob mentality sometimes of like, you're the evil person taking this beautiful tree down, right? So, but usually working really close with the property that's most affected. And ultimately, if we can work with some of those individuals and maybe give them a choice on what they'd like to see replanted, because each one of these trees we do replant, unless it's in some absurd location that we shouldn't replant it. That's part of our tree care program. So there's trees that I've replanted that I can't believe how big they are now already.
That's great.
So,
It's good work.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for that.
There's a lot that goes into it,
Yeah.
but we're really proud of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so moving on to Willow Tree at Cook Park. So Scott, do you want
Sure, yeah. Well, we took it down. Surprise, got you, no. It's gone, so it's,
Oh, sorry.
obviously, we're really upset about that. That was an iconic tree. It was really sad to see it go, but, you know, we had a lot of passionate people that came forward after the tree was initially damaged by wind and said, hey, how do I get a piece of this? And so, you know, I do have a list of a handful of people that expressed an interest in trying to obtain some of the wood from it. And so I plan on getting a hold of those people and letting them take, I mean, other than the base, the trunk of the tree, because that, we might have some other ideas on that. If people want to come and collect some of this material and do something with it, by all means. I don't think that I have enough people on a list that are gonna take all the debris that's there by any means, so I really wanted to put it in front of this group for two reasons. One, see if you guys all have an interest in helping distribute the wood throughout the community to, or at least get it in the hands of some people that might do something with it. Not that we expect it or will hold them to it, but maybe they'll do something cool with it. Maybe, you know, they can replant a piece of it and have it regrow,
And you
but
said you have everything from the tree, including the little tiny little branches and things? 'Cause
yes.
you can propagate those. All you have to do
Crazy.
is stick them in the ground and water.
Well,
them.
now's your time because like,
Next month, soon I did that. Soon I went out there, but when the tree fell, I cut probably 2 dozen sprigs, you know, tiny little branches off. We stuck them in the ground in the lot next door to us and they survived the winter. Well,
Wow.
it's no winter, but
Yeah.
they're surviving. So you could have baby willow, kind of like baby Yoda.
Willow 2.0. Yeah.
So I think that would be a project that I'd personally get involved in and that'd be one of the things I could do. And, you know, you can, however else, if anybody else has any ideas.
here's my only suggestion. What I can't, I'll tell you what I can't have. What I can't have are random people showing up to the Public Works facility with chainsaws, wielding them on our property. From a liability standpoint, that's not gonna happen. So, unless I'm overruled on that, but I don't think I will be, but, so if you have people that want some of this material, stop by Public Works. I would encourage anyone to maybe make an appointment. You don't have to make an appointment just to come and look at what's there. It's in the backyard, pull into the driveway. It's like closer to Maple Street than it is to Blue Star. Pull in, take a look at it. If there's things that you want that are like manageable pieces, by all means, hop out and pile them up and take them. But if you need chainsawing, I would say make an appointment with Public Works so that we can have somebody who's skilled and trained on this work so that we can help assist people get some of the lumber.
Would it be helpful, Scott, if we say, hey, if you want this, we could put it out to the public? Say if you want this, and there could be a day,
Sure, yeah, however you want to do it is fine. I just,
someone from your staff could
Yes.
facilitate that, and we could, at your choosing, right? So
Yeah.
it's convenient for you.
yep, that would be fine. If we could lump it into a day, that would be great. If not, you know, we can make accommodations too, so.
Okay.
But
But would it be then like, sort of, here's the day, kind of first come, first serve? Or,
Has
you know.
anybody expressed an idea about a project or a woodworking project to do something to benefit the community or something like that?
yeah, I think we had that gentleman that showed up to the workshop meeting when it first got damaged that said that he'd like to take some pieces of it, you know, turn it into something and then try to give it back to the community. So he's on the list too, and I definitely plan on giving that gentleman a priority.
Dun, dun, dun.
Enter the fairy tree. This did not make the
I
slide.
teed up perfectly for you.
Send me his name.
Yes.
Sure.
So this idea, I think I mentioned it last meeting. So Herrick Library, if you haven't been recently, up on the second floor in the children's area, they, with partnering with ODC, took an old tree and created this incredible fairy tree. And so it is not, you can't even tell to scale, but I stood here and it's taller than I am. So it's probably 5.5 feet tall, because I don't even touch that. And it goes all the way around, and it is all of these intricate little rooms that have been carved out, and it is so magical. So even if there's a portion of the tree that would be in keeping with this, And then the question would be, okay, so where would this live? Because it would need to be in an indoor space because the
Okay.
wood needs to dry out and it can't. To spend this kind of money, to have someone do something like this, it has to be a long-term thing. And have people have access to it and it has to be covered.
So it has to be inside, but it can't be outside and covered.
I even think that wouldn't be
Okay.
worth it, especially with a willow tree. It sounds like that absorbs moisture anyway. And this is lacquered, like if you saw it in person, I mean, honestly, if you pass it around, if you're driving by, just run upstairs. It is.
Herrick Library.
Herrick on 8th. Yeah, it's a river. It's incredible. So, and I asked, I met the gentleman that did that carving and he was so into it and he's just incredibly talented. And I think they spent around $7,000 doing that. That's not to say that we would have to do that. That's just a number out there. But you look at what the level of detail that they got on that thing, and you could have multiple kids playing on that. It's so large. I mean, that just doesn't do it justice.
And this is in the children's section.
Yeah. So anyway, that is just an idea to keep one portion of that.
Scott, do you
Alive.
think we have a big enough chunk where something like this is possible?
Yeah, I think, so unfortunately, the base of it had to get chopped up into several different, I think, 3 pieces. But I was talking to, we had some discussion about it. I think that if somebody has a skill to create this thing, then hiding seams and securing it through like use of threaded rod and I would leave that judgment call up to the creator of it, but I think it's very doable.
Does anybody know Marcia Perry?
Mhm.
She's a local woodworking artist and she has a studio on Blue Star. She's really in Lake Township.
I
But
sent you these, right?
I stopped by there one time when it was, the art studio thing, where you could go from place to place. And she does amazing work.
Mm,
And it just dawned on me, and I actually bought a piece that she does. I mean, it's
Okay.
fantastic. So she'd be somebody we could have take a look at it and maybe she could give us some ideas and that would be an easy thing to do.
Yeah, if she's interested, it's at DPW.
Yeah.
Kelly, on this one, do you know if there was any significance of this tree?
I
Is
don't have
there
that background,
anything?
no.
Yeah, I was just curious.
No, I don't know how the project started. I
Okay.
just got the details of that it is an incredible.
It's
amount of work that
so
went into it.
cool.
Yeah, but my main thing is that at some point, this thing's kind of a mess in our yard at Public Works. As you can imagine, there's a lot of material there. So I just don't, I want nobody to be mad at me if, end of July or something, we end up getting rid of this and saying, all right, you have your chance.
All right.
So,
So how about a deadline, July
Yeah.
31st?
let's bump it up. Yeah, well, I mean,
About
I'm
June
serious.
30.
We have a lawn to mow, and so,
June 30th?
Like June 1st,
yeah, June would be great. Mid-June, yeah, June.
mid-June?
You just
Yeah.
cut it by 2 months.
Yeah,
Come on, it's already March 1st.
No.
All right, how about June 15th? Compromise?
That
Okay.
sounds great.
How much
So-
will it cost?
Do, like
Well,
I mentioned an artist, you've talked to somebody else. I mean, the Very Tree guy,
Yep.
could be potential. Do we want to try to
I see
have
it
some
sounds-
artists maybe take a crack at it before we just start letting people come and hack
Well,
on it,
I'll go out there and I'll collect all the things that can be replanted.
Mm.
But then we have 3 months to actually, or 2 months to actually get some ideas.
Well, the question is, do we want to formalize this and put it out to the public, right? Do we want to create, sort of.
Hey, come
this is what's
pick up,
left,
yeah.
And these are the options if you would like.
Right,
I think
but I
the
guess
people, the people that have had like the passion enough to take their time out of their life and come forward to the city, even attend meetings, and just express that, wanting those bigger pieces, trying to get those bigger pieces into the hands of people that are gonna use it
Mhm.
is probably the biggest
Priority.
priority.
Mhm.
So, again, for the fairy tree or the guy that wants to build a bench or whatever it is, notifying them first and then from there, letting Keith take some of the sticks and stuff like that. That's gonna be of very little consequence to a woodworker, so.
I guess I would want to know if, one, if this gentleman, would be interested in doing another project. And then 2, we would have to get the funding,
Yeah,
to
right.
be able to pay for, that. And then if other artists that might be interested,
I saw in Oh, actually, it was a friend of mine emailed me. Douglas, basically, this is nothing to do with the tree, but Douglas has some bike racks and they're wanting to make their bike racks look more artistic. So they just put out a thing asking for RFP for any artists that wanted to, make a proposal on how to make their bike racks. I mean, would we want to do something like that where we just ask for artists, to come forward if they're interested in doing something with this wood? And then do we want it to be something that stays in the community?
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, we're not gonna, what do we
Yeah.
care otherwise?
I think it's
So-
good. I think we just have to be very clear that there isn't necessarily like a funding source for this. So this is if they want to do something for the community or they want to do something and they just
But-
have access to the wood.
I mean, we probably would need to figure out where we could put something, right? I mean, you can't ask people to design something and we don't even know what we're gonna do with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not, I mean, I think our library is, not to copy exactly what Eric did, but I mean, our library is a great spot where kids hang out inside.
Right, I mean,
I can't think of any place in the city of Saugatuck that,
I know that'd be large enough.
yeah.
So
Okay.
you're going to contact some people who stepped up.
yeah, there's a thought, and I'm like, is there any place at the school?
It just seems more of an adult place than, I mean, obviously they
summer
have
camp.
kids programming and everything, but.
Where, the library?
No, I was saying within the city of Saugatuck, besides the library, the SCA is another area that something could be on permanent
I mean, the
display.
CVB has a giant space in the middle of their building too.
Right. I'm just thinking of places where kids would be hanging out, and at least the SCA has kids programming.
Oh, if we had a
Kinda.
rec center.
Yeah, wouldn't
I
it be
know.
a rec center? Yes.
Or if we restored the building out at
Yeah.
the airport.
So you're going to, who's going to contact the guy who did the Herrick?
Oh, I can.
Okay.
I'm happy to send photos or whatever
Okay.
will help.
I'll swing by this week.
Okay. And then there's another kind of piece to this too, is the tree's gone, so I'm gonna have that stump grinded.
Mhm.
And then I'm probably gonna just move forward with replanting a tree of some kind.
How about a willow?
Could do a willow.
You're like,
Maybe some, yeah, we could, I mean.
I think it's great.
They're fast growing and they, yeah, I'm always open to suggestion. If we think a willow tree is best suited there, that's fine. There's a lot of justification of why that would be, or if we want something a little more desirable, I could look at, some sort of white oak or,
Oh, white oak is
How
beautiful.
large of a tree could you
that's an ideal.
access to?
Oh, I don't know. I have to look into that because I'm also still planting 2 trees over at the playground as well. So we want to, typically what we do is we buy our bald and burlap trees from Great Lakes Ornamentals, and they have some pretty sizable trees that are 3 or 4 inch diameter at the base and are 15+ feet tall. And so pretty big, but I think like the conversation about Village Square Playground, that's kind of, we're gonna be planting more of a screening tree, or a couple of trees versus street trees. So then we're looking at conifer type style trees. And so I'm probably gonna locate, I think there's a company out of Grand Rapids that I located that has one of the bigger tree spades around. So
4 feet?
I'm not the base of it, the diameter,
Yeah, I think that's what you told me. They have
it was a
4-foot
massive
spade.
tree spade. And so I'm
Ginormous.
curious to see, yeah, more details to come on.
Okay.
on
So
how
obviously
big
you're
the tree-
thinking of, replanting it so to create shade in that area once again, like eventually to have.
Yeah, I don't
a
think we
nice
should go
shade
conifer. I think that we should, get something that thins out in the winter time. We all want more sunlight.
You'll be the most
Um,
popular guy in town if you go with a willow.
Yeah.
I
We
disagree.
can, we can.
I would disagree because you put up a white oak, it supports so much wildlife. And it's an iconic tree and, it just lasts forever. And
We,
so I disagree.
there's one that I've been
understand.
planting around town that no one knows about. It's called a common hackberry tree. It sounds like a terrible name. Hackberry, that can't look good, right?
I
It is.
planted one.
You
I
did.
planted one in my
and
yard.
They're native. They're huge. They have a decent growth rate and we don't have many of them. I think I know of 3 of them in the city. Well, now.
Now
4
you
if
know
have
for it.
them.
Yeah, I planted mine
Um,
from one of those little bitty things you get from the Arbor Day Foundation,
Yeah.
and it's the only one that lived.
But they're
And
very,
it's thriving.
they're disease resistant, insect tolerant, and they're a full canopy tree. So we could do something like that as well.
Eat the hackberry.
Ooh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
And that is also very good for wildlife.
Yeah. And that park is perfect for something like that.
And do we have to take into consideration that sometimes that park has a lot of water when, you know,
Yeah, that's the benefit of the willow tree.
Yeah, that's a
Where
good
they'll
point.
absorb
That's
a
a
lot
good
of
point.
that.
I mean, I know you like the oak and I know the hackberry came up, but I think if you plant a willow, we'll be the most popular people in town.
Yeah,
We
well,
can, we certainly can.
but
I think that
I,
There's a
I
lot of
think-
places to plant oaks and stuff. I'm just saying.
yeah, but there's not many places that have that open space and can, the oak can really develop its canopy. And I just think maybe come back with a couple of options. How's that?
You know, as far as city parks go, I don't know of a lot of municipalities that would choose a black willow over, no disrespect, sir, but
because they're messy.
They're just
The
kinda
branches fall down a
scrubby,
lot.
you know,
Yeah.
they get to a good size and then there's a lot of times a failure of some kind,
Yeah.
you know? It-
I mean, the oaks are slow growers. I get it. I've got a 400-year-old oak in my yard. We've got the oldest oak in Saginaw.
Nice.
Um,
Older than Bobby Gones?
Huh?
Older
Yeah, I
than
was gonna
Bobby Gones.
say, there's a plaque on the one in Bobby God's backyard.
I'll put a plaque in
There's a
mine.
plaque?
The tree in my yard, his great
Please don't put
grandfather was
plaques on
born
city
at the
trees.
time of Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, but you shouldn't put anything on your tree.
So, all right, so the tree in my yard was in the it was part of the Michigan's oldest tree contest.
Ooh,
And in
that's
the
fun.
90s, it was 398 years old.
Dang,
Oh.
that is something.
I'm gonna come see that,
You need a
Yeah.
plaque,
but in front of it.
not
I
in
don't want-
front of it.
I don't tell anybody about the darn tree, except I just did it on publicly.
What kind of tree did you say it is?
It's a
Red
red
oak?
oak. What's my,
Okay.
all right, so we got that through that
All
one.
right, so Scott,
Okay, so Kelly's gonna talk to this person. Do you want
I
to
could
reach out to your
Marcia Perry.
person?
I think more the merrier. Let's
Yeah.
just do a little bit of reconnaissance and see what we come up with.
Right, and then I could we could have the artist come and look at the wood that's at the Public Works.
Yep.
And so they can see it and then they could make a suggestion.
Mhm.
But we would, if it's gonna be something has to stay indoors, which I think most
You
of
have
it
to
would,
choose
we would have
where.
to figure out. And like, maybe we have some size constraints,
Mhm.
which would be good if we could tell the artist, you know?
Yeah, but we're not saying what the artist is gonna do.
Well,
They might
no,
have
but I
totally
mean, if they
different
made
vision of
something, they
what
came
they-
up, right, but I guess we don't know where it's gonna go.
Right.
So that's I wouldn't want
We
them
have
to
to
put a
think
lot
about
of
it.
effort into it, and then it's like, well, that's too big, you know?
Yeah, and we
But I
have
don't
to
know.
get permission
Yeah, and
on.
I think they have to come up with concepts first before we get to.
Okay.
Okay,
Alright.
All right.
okay, study group updates, and so,
We put it on there on the agenda. We're, like we talked about last time, we're kind of in this like transitional period right now where we've got projects cooking, but some of them aren't really, some of them are really at the staff level to
Yep.
just manage and execute the project. And so the only real study group that I could think of were invasive species. And so we want to just give an opportunity for any updates if there are
Okay.
any.
Do you have I need my glasses. Okay. We've been gifted a website that was already started by one of the chemistry teachers at the high school. You all know Brad Smith. He did this years ago for the dunes. I was talking to him recently in the Bahamas, and he said he's got this website that he's gonna gift me.
Great.
And he goes, God, I haven't thought about that in years. I've been paying for it, but you can have it. And it's a template that's going on and it's a Weebly website and we can have it. And so I accepted it from him. And he's got a group. I talked to the interim principal, what's her name again?
Melanie Moore.
Melanie Moore.
Melanie Moore, MM. And she contacted Brad and I threw a bunch of emails out and when you saw them. And she was more than happy to recommend to Brad that they start this, that he gets a couple students to work with us and formulate a invasive species website for Saugatuck. Kind of simple thing where you have the invasive species named, you got a little paragraph on it and why it's invasive, a picture of it, and then how to treat it and where to, and some websites you can go to for additional information. And if you want to treat it locally and what to do. And he accepted that too. He said, yeah, I can get a couple kids to work on it. And it can be an ongoing project too. You know, if every year or two it wants to be updated, and somebody suggested to me that we brought it up briefly, we could actually throw another page on there because this thing's, you know, you can do whatever you want with this thing on recommended plantings too. Not only how to treat invasive species, but, you know, recommended plantings that are deer not proof, but deer resist in your yard. Like, don't plant tulips.
Okay, so Keith, are they keeping this live right now, the Saugatuck?
This
Vision?
is live, absolutely.
But are they active with it or he hasn't done anything with it in a while?
No, he hasn't done anything because he forgot completely about it. I think it's 3, 4, or 5 years old already.
Right.
This
But
particular.
why do you
thing.
prefer this over just adding, you know, invasive species or native plantings to like the city's website?
This could be a link off the city's website. The template's already here.
Okay,
And it'd be easier for the kids to work on it. Since it's
existing.
existing and they can go right into from their tablets or their computers at the high school. And to create it, update it, change the name, which we're gonna do anyways.
But you are gonna change the URL.
I'm going to change.
Okay.
And it would be easier that way. So that way they don't have to go into the city's website to change it. Doesn't have to go to Sarah, doesn't have to go to Jamie or whoever handles that kind of thing.
Okay.
And it can just be a link on the city website and it could exist by itself.
Nice.
You dig?
Yeah, I dig.
All right.
So if we wanted it to be a link from the city's website, do we have to get anybody to approve that? And you can,
You
we
know,
could add it.
and we'll do, you know, we'll keep the same format. Threats to Saugatuck Duck, threats to the Saugatuck and the tri-community area. We'll kind of include that. And, you know, how it's caused human activity, and we'll just, I think we can have some fun with it. It can be a nice little knowledge base.
Is there a way we could have people communicate if they've identified something that's not on their property, but they see it somewhere that, you know, would we want to have any kind of interactive, you know?
It's a good question.
That's a really great way to reach out. I mean, just in terms of like our brush and leaf collection program and the material that we're collecting, basically.
Similar like what we do for your page. And just have an invasive species page.
Do you have, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
We have one.
Is there a way to tell how many people actually look at these pages like here?
Tracks it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you put like a contact us type of thing, like you have on DPW's page, and put in a service request and go to Keith.
Yeah, I think kind of being on the offense with it is most beneficial, just because by the time we get to the point where we're reacting to it, there's already a lot of damage happening out there, and a lot of this stuff begins on private property. But yeah, same type of concept with like, you know, pushing out information about like tree care, like the vines that are growing up all these trees, and just educating the public on how to, like, one, it's a problem, you should look for it. And then if it's on your property, you should do something about it.
Yeah.
And,
And once you take it down, where do you dispose of it? So it doesn't
right,
end up.
right.
That's a good idea. I didn't even think of that.
That's my biggest thing.
Or even
is
like
I
notifying.
can identify it, I can track it down, I can take it down, and then I'm like, ugh,
Put it in your compost.
what do I do with
Oh.
this?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I know with garlic
yeah.
mustard, you'd bag it up and you'd throw it in the garbage.
Is that the best bet?
Depends on what it is, like
Yeah, you have
Japanese,
For example.
yeah, bagging them up and
Bagging
drying
them
them
up.
out is always a good option, but burning them too is a good option.
I mean,
Permitted.
Can do that
Burn-
What are we burning?
no.
It's not a little fire pit.
Okay,
Okay,
good. That's great, Keith.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So from a structure, so, you know, we're going on 2.5 years here as a committee. We've always tasked to the subgroups. So now we've got priorities from council. So I think we need to think about how we want our agenda structured from here on out. And like, we were always assigned, like, I'm the co-chair, of the airport property, I'm the co-chair of Village Square.
Mhm.
Is that no longer? Like, we need to make decisions on that, of like, who's in charge of what, and do they exist on this anymore? Are we changing the format? I just think that's a question
I
for the
think
group.
That was one of my hopes, was just to, you know, get the information out there, give people a month or so to digest it and figure out, formulate their opinion of how they'd like this to go, because, you know, yeah, we have the priorities coming in from council, but it's ultimately up to this committee as a group to determine how it's best to go about executing on these missions. And so I think that's a fair question, and just something that we should all be prepared to come back with at the next meeting, with a specific plan of what we all think we'd like to see or how this should go.
yeah, I mean, I think that whether you call them study groups or projects, it's kind of the same thing.
It is.
So before we called them study groups and listed our projects. Now we're just now this one basically just listed the projects.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of indifferent of what we call it.
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody, you know, but I think that every project needs to be, you know, clearly structured, you know, that's where I come from. And is this a good time for me to talk about my project plan that, you know, I didn't send this out to everybody. I wanted to, but I made some copies. And Sarah, can you pull it up? So this is just an example. So, you know, I'm all over the native plants, and, you know, a goal at some point, you know, I'd like to have us work on what I'm calling pocket prairies. So who wrote this?
No, I love it.
Oh, good, because I would love to, I'm so happy to hear you say that, Keith.
This is genius.
An example, but yes.
No, this is
Went back and
awesome.
said that too.
And so I just think that, you know, basically, and this is just coming from, you know, and my background, you know, corporate background. And you can make these a lot more elaborate. I was trying not to do that because I don't want to scare people. But also, it just really makes you before you jump into something, you know, it has you stop and think. Okay, what am I trying to accomplish? What's it going to take to do that? And almost my favorite is project risks, as in what can go wrong? And if I can at least try to anticipate what could go wrong, how do I mitigate it? And it really doesn't take that much, and I'd be happy to help anybody if they were stuck on trying to put something like this together. But it's really just like, what's the overarching goal? So in this case, you know, I said, well, I'd like to create these little pocket prairies, and I would view this as a trial run project. And, but more specifically, what are the objectives? And so, you know, I want to support the pollinators and provide food and shelter for birds too, because a pollinator garden or a pocket prairie is also going to generate seeds that the birds will eat and that kind of thing. So that would be a goal for me as well. And so we would also want to really determine what native plant species thrive in our area. So we could ultimately communicate that to people and then promote this concept, you know, within our community with the goal of encouraging residents to do this on their own.
But Nancy, I love this whole thing, but in terms of how we're running PPW, like, what's your thought process?
My
on
thought
that? Like,
process
where-
is
how does it fit in?
like, let's take naming the airport property.
Mhm.
Just use this format. What is the goal? You know, and then basically who's going to be involved?
Yep.
And background is basically just, why are we doing this a little bit, you know? So, you know, just a little bit of background. And then what is your approach? And you've already figured an approach out for
Right.
airport property naming.
Sure.
But I would just put a few bullet points
Yeah.
there. And then now, what can go wrong with airport project, property naming? So I would say we don't come up with any good names. I don't know, you know, you're just
Right,
kind of
right,
pie in the
right,
sky.
right.
You know, or we come up with some 3 great names and the council says to all of them,
Right. Okay.
so you just kind of, and then, okay, is there anything? And really, I think you've already kind of thought of that by saying, put out 3 names. Don't, like, we could have said, we're going to come up with a name and then the risk would be council wouldn't like it. So we've already sort of mitigated that risk, so this is,
Yeah,
and this
okay.
is not a huge project.
This is just great for like, just, projects going forward, just having a nice little organized, way to keep focused.
Right.
Is great.
And then you basically have what's the target end date? So this project, it should have an end. If it's such a great project that then there's a phase 2, fantastic.
That
You
makes
do a-
sense to me.
You
I
do
mean,
a new one for phase 2, and now what do we did this. And, another thing you can do in your project document is just to say, well, how will I know when I'm done? And how will I know if I've been successful? But I didn't want to overload it with, that kind of thing. But what's your success criteria?
Well, I think this fits really nicely with the conversation that we had at the last PPW meeting where here we've done some very high level projects that involve all of us, council, staff, outside dollars, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And then, Keith and Brian had said, well, I'd like to do some smaller scale, just to like
Exactly.
let people know that like we're still investing in the community and that there are small things that community members can get involved in. So this is an example of that green stormwater stuff that we've talked about, like rain gardens and things like that. And I think for those, I think for all of it, but I think especially like that is really helpful too. And
Mhm.
like, are those some smaller projects that people that have the interest can still run with, right? That aren't gonna take dollars. So.
Yes, yes. So basically I just would, and it's like invasive species. I think, Keith, your invasive species project has been, oriented towards education. But, we can also think about invasive species of, well, actually eradicating them. So, so that would be another aspect of the project. But your project, has been defined, I think, more as, education. And that's fine, but, let's just acknowledge that or say we do want it to be more.
Yeah.
And, and then it can have additional objectives or it can have another phase.
that's smart. I think, I think that's a really smart way of doing it. And I think that as long as we do it in a way that kind of like, I've been given like a Parks and Public Works Committee flow chart and right. So like kind of how a lot of the things that we work on, what's the structure that we need to follow to, and so ultimately it's vague, which is great. But it all starts with council priorities. And then from there, we can break it down and say, well, how best does this committee want to try to fulfill that mission? Some of the like, I'll call them study groups for now, but like some of the study groups, they're just never going to go away. Like, because we don't want them to, right? Like invasive species, that's just a continuous battle. There's always something that we can be doing. But then there's some smaller study groups, like figuring out where to put that spinner from the playground, right? Like that's a much shorter duration. So I think this is the type of conversation that's really good for us to have and bring these ideas forward next meeting in specifics matter. With, okay, what do we think that the groups should be? Which ones are long-term and kind of always stay with us? And then which ones are kind of the more gimme pots, right? And that would be helpful. So then ultimately the structure is, again, council sets the priority. We kind of break that down into some smaller groups of people. Amongst those groups, there's maybe a little bit of back and forth depending on the project between that study group and then some design elements from engineering. As long as they're a council priority, we can spend and recommend spending money on those designs. And then kind of a little bit of a volley between design and PPW before we ultimately have our discussion and our recommendation that gets pushed to council. And then once that happens, then at that point, the study group's done, no matter what, because that's then up to the staff to manage the project with our professional services. So.
Right. So, so I think that by next meeting, think about this and, you can, make some suggestions on how to make it better or, or shorten it or whatever. But, if we could basically agree on what our project template is going to be, and then if we could all, pretty much adhere to it. So I think that also just picking or deciding which projects we're working on, we've got council priorities. Sometimes we might bubble something up on our own, but then if we do that, do we need to just advise council that, here's another thing that we're working on. It's not gonna really take I think if it's not gonna take much staff resources or actual dollars,
Right.
we can probably,
Well,
run with it, but-
maybe and maybe not. And remember, we
That's-
have two things that really guide us, right? Which is one is the annual strategic planning from council.
Mhm.
But then two, we have why the PPW was formulated in the first place, which is outlined in the charter. So like, for example, like we don't need council's permission to talk about streetscaping,
Mhm.
right?
good.
That's in the charter. And so that gives us the green light to go ahead and work on stuff like that. So as long as it's within those two brackets, then we're,
Then we just can go.
yes.
I like that.
Right.
And if there's something that we think that, it doesn't easily fall within one of those two avenues, then, either Lauren or myself, one of us can take it back to council and say, this is something that we'd like to work on.
Like the spinner.
Right.
Cause the spinner is gonna, I think it's a lot of work. No, it's a decision.
It's a decision and it's a recommendation maybe
Yeah.
from this group.
Yeah,
that-
they take it or leave it, but here's our recommendation. We were
Right.
actively involved in this project. We bought this equipment. Here's a piece that
We'd like to see it.
we'd like to,
used.
so
Yeah.
here's our recommendation, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I don't think we need permission to talk about that.
Nope, we don't.
I mean, and you
So-
could also usually, I think with any decision, you can say, but if we don't do that, what would we do? What's our other option? And I don't know with the spinner, what our other option would be, other than you could say, well,
So,
send
you
it to
could-
the landfill. That's because we cannot find
Can
another
sell-
place.
What?
I'm just throwing,
We're gonna find a place.
Right, so,
Find it.
okay, but there, see, I turned your brain on, well, wait a minute, there could be other options before we just latch on to, let's put it at the beach, even though I mean, I kind of like that idea myself,
Yeah.
but,
There are a lot of kids.
just to be thoughtful always, in your
Use the nature
decision making,
reserve.
so.
Nothing there for anybody, for hikers.
So, I think what we really want to clarify is what are the active projects? And we know obviously some of them are right here. Is there anything else that we're adding? And Scott, you want us to really kind of determine that by the next meeting?
I think so. I think if everyone can kind of digest this over the course of a month and then come back with our recommendations of what, everyone's going to have their slightly unique approach on how this should go, but I think we kind of get the general consensus and that's our roadmap.
Okay,
Agreed.
okay,
So.
all right.
But I also want you to keep that, I might, on the next meeting, we might take a little deeper dive into our capital improvements plan, just
Mhm.
because that's within the charter underneath, like for us to review. And so, that'll help kind of put some of those big, some people think they're boring, like road projects and stuff like that, that aren't as fun as the park projects, but they're super critical. And
But if it's the road by your
it's
house.
the
it's
road,
fine.
then it's really fun to talk about.
We are parks and public works.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but like we talked about in this very meeting, we talked about, we're constantly, over the course of this year, we're hoping to have a more comprehensive capital improvements plan. That's an effort led by me in particular. And, like we talked about the senior center building. That's not even on the radar or plan at all, at this point. And so that is something, it's still an asset of the cities.
Mhm.
And no matter what, whether we make a move on it or not, that's, who knows, but we should at least evaluate that because it's a capital asset of the cities.
Mhm.
So,
And I would just add also, I went ahead and reviewed the 5-year plan that was put together last year. And I would think that while we're not going to do all of those, it's a 5-year plan. We're not going to do them all in this year, but we could still be pulling from that and, and then like this one pager that's right there of, these were the priorities. So if, just something to think about. Okay. Are we ready to move to public comments?
Sure.
Okay, is there anyone who wants to make a comment? No one in the room, since it's empty. Anyone online? Make a comment? Nope, okay. I don't think we have any correspondence. Okay, so I guess we're at member closing comments. So Keith, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can come up with a nice little list for our next meeting. I'll just mention a few of them now. Kayak launch ramp, no mow May. Maybe get an idea of for your, for your, who wrote this, for your Pocket Prairie trial gig. There might be an ordinance in the way of doing that. We have we have an ordinance that says you have to mow your lawn in Saugatuck. So I'd like to maybe get a handle on that to understand it by the next meetings.
And actually, I didn't put that down here, but I had thought of it as one of the risks,
Because I got,
that it'll look messy.
Mm.
It'll look messy.
I was in violation of that once. And I had to cut the lawn. It's on the hill too, so we won't go there. And we don't have to go there. But I think that, I think, just to sing our own accolades, we've done in the 2 years or so since we've been formulated. We've got some stuff accomplished and done that the public has really taken notice. And they've seen some things done that hasn't, that's enjoyable in town, and everybody's like happy. The playground just knocked it out of the park for something progressive that happened here. So I think we're in a good spot. Invasive species, I'll start working on that this week with Brad, and that's all I got for now.
Okay. Scott, did you want to add anything?
Nope, just taking it in.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and then Lauren?
Sure. I just want to thank everybody for all of your work. Keith on invasives, Nancy with all the organizational work, taking on the chairperson role, Kelly working with the school and, getting started on a lot of things. You guys are doers and I just appreciate all of you.
Oh, thank you. And
Yeah.
we appreciate you as well, Lauren. You're a big doer.
We're glad you're healthy.
Yes. Kelly.
No, I just want to thank everyone here for their good work, and I will get going on using my new project charter for the naming of the airport property.
I can
like it.
send everybody the Word doc,
Yeah.
so that
I like
it.
it's easy. Yeah, and I'm just really excited, about going forward here. I think we were, get some structure in place. I think we can get so much done. We've got so much enthusiasm. And I'm disappointed that Brian and Judy weren't here for this meeting because I think it was a good one. I did actually have lunch with Judy the other day and, she's just raring to go, just waiting for, like what couldn't she work on? And then, I kind of will want to reach out to each of you maybe individually, just, to get a better handle on your particular interests and thoughts and that type of thing. So, so that is, well, two other things unrelated to all of that. On my walk here, my neighbor who has the horrendous street light right over their house, said, "Hey, what's going on with that?" And I said, well, so far it's not a priority. But I think that, it's still something that is a priority to the community. So I would, or at least some members of our community, I don't know how we want to move forward on that. It's a big thing, but I'm just going to mention it, okay? I don't have the solution, but I swear, when I lived in Chicago, my neighborhood was not any more lit up than it is right here in Saugatuck since they put that light in. It's crazy. And then also bike racks. We talked at one point, our group was, advocating for more bike racks, but I think the city or the council kind of took that on.
It's happening, I
So,
believe. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that basically a done project?
I think it has to do with pouring some cement slabs for them to come in and.
It's at the,
yeah.
at the point where staff manages the project.
Yep,
So as
it's
far as like
happening.
PPW's involvement goes.
Yep.
That's it.
Did we
We're-
get it? Did we
It's
get?
happening.
Yeah.
It's happening.
And
Did we
did we get any
have a
artists?
design for
just-
those things? Did we find a cool
I think
design for
they
it?
got approved through council.
It's not to say that this has to be forever or
Yeah.
permanent. I mean, we can always adapt in the future if there's some, but a plan will be implemented and there will be more bike racks this spring.
Yay.
Okay, all right, that's it for me.
Okay, I will give a motion to adjourn.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Returned.
You guys, great meeting.
All right.
This is-
Cool.